Hey guys, welcome back to Dice Roll Drama, finally. And welcome to my review of the live-action How to Train Your Dragon remake. Now, I'll be upfront, I'm pretty neutral towards the movie. In this review, I'm pretty sure we'll be going over roughly the same amount of positives and negatives. But for a quick structure breakdown, I'll dive a little bit more into my neutrality towards the movie, and then I want to give a chronological order, or mostly, breakdown of the things that I noticed. And lastly, I'd like to open up a discussion. If circumstances were ideal, what might the future of live-action remakes look like? I welcome your answers in the comments, but I'll give mine later in the video. Let's give more detail on my overall impression of the film, really quick. I'm pretty sure I can see what they were going for, and I think their proposed purpose was promising, but in practice, not perfect. This movie reads like a director's cut edition, and to be fair, it uses that extra time well, for the most part. It also kind of feels like it was trying to have the movie versus stage play effect. This is when you have two mediums, not always movie and stage play, but that's definitely where you see it the most often. But following the same story, but both of them possess different tonal and narrative priorities. For example, if we look at Life of Pi, both the movie and play present a live-action or myth versus reality debate. But the movie really leaned into the ambiguity and metaphor of the story they were telling. Meanwhile, the play said pretty much all the quiet parts out loud. And fascinatingly, both are fantastic in their own right. But, okay, oof. You try to do that with How to Train Your Dragon, you've got some big shoes to fill. And I don't think it quite worked out here. The live-action remake tries to be more humorous, like I mentioned, tone priorities. It also tries to deepen the core debate between Hiccup and the Vikings, thus narrative priorities. But we'll dig into why this stumbled in just a minute. There's one more thing I need to clear up before I can get to the movie review. When I critique the acting at certain points of the movie, I'm not criticizing the actors. Now, I'm well aware the internet loses its mind about the casting choices for every live-action remake. I'm not touching that debate with a 10-foot pole. Except to encourage everyone to be nicer to the actors. Look, the shallow purpose of these films is selling nostalgia. No one would argue with you if you said that. But then that means that the actors, just like us audience members, probably have a lot of nostalgia for these stories as well. So can you imagine what a dream come true would be if you get told, we want you to play the live-action counterpart of your favorite childhood character? Just some food for thought. Sorry for the length of that sidetrack. Let's move on to the review. Starting out with the expansions of the movie. The expansions of the opening. They were a lot of fun. There's a decoy sheep attached to a trap, probably Hiccup's doing. And there's some extra jokes that are good. I'll call them out if any of them, seem relevant. First off, at the blacksmith, when Hiccup's bola launcher is, when he's trying to get it ready, he accidentally pops it open, like in the original, and the bola flies out, misses the Viking that it hit in the animated version, making us all think they were going to skip over that joke. But instead, a second bola flies out, which then knocks over the Viking. Astrid and Gobber also more or less internally roll their eyes at Hiccup for crushing on Astrid. And speaking of Hiccup, Mason Thames plays a really good reinterpretation of him. The trailers had me worried with him being kind of fast in certain scenes, where I was expecting the directors to go for a pause and breathe type of pacing, but it actually works great. Throughout the entire film, he reads as kind of scrappy, and you'll see it with Nico Parker as Astrid too, but it feels like they knew the characters growing up, and their versions of the characters are faithful, but also their own characters, if that makes sense. I'd actually argue some of the Vikings were better in the live action too, particularly Stoic and Gobber. Their actors hit a home run here. They had more gestures and subtle motions than they did in the animation, and I appreciate it. And it makes sense. I'm not chewing on the animators for not having as many subtleties with the characters. In live action, you can do all of that without increasing the time and budget requirements. That being said, I didn't love when the dialogue overlapped with the original movie, because it was the trippiest deja vu I've ever had. Like, there was a disconnect between my eyes and ears for maybe 20% of the movie, because it felt like I was hearing the original movie, but on screen I was seeing the new one. I'm also not sold on some of the world building. Like, the other kids are firefighters now. I guess the idea was that it makes more sense than them being dragon fighters, considering they're in school for dragon fighting. But did anyone actually question that part of the original movie? Anyways, there's some fun stunts from that, so I guess that's nice. But I just don't know that the extra specification was necessary. But they did a great job for this extended battle sequence. We actually saw what the original movie meant when they said they found the extra sheep. We also saw the dragons operating a bit better. They were trying to use their fire to set traps and environmental hazards, rather than just randomly breathing it. I liked those additions. They're arguably pointless, but they make the fight feel more strategic. Now, sometimes this extra time worked to their detriment. Like, they have a deadly natter pinned for a full 3 minutes, and it just flies off at the end. And it's like, are you gonna finish that, or... Because in the original, this moment was only a few seconds, so it was easier to believe that the natter was pinned down and still escaped. Anyway, concluding the battle scene, Gobber just shines, both in walking Hiccup home and then when he's talking to Stoic later. The original was good. In that one, he reads more as a sympathetic but strategic advisor when he's advocating for Hiccup. The live action plays him more as a Godfather type. I'm not saying one's better than the other, I really enjoyed both. But he has a couple of extra lines that really sell the idea that he's on Hiccup's side. Like that close-up in the original when Hiccup's like, I just want to be like you guys, and then closes the door. That's it in the animated version. In the live action, we get a close-up of Gobber's face, which is very sympathetic, and he says, I know. Fantastic work. Now, I also didn't realize how much I missed Gobber and Stoic's banter until they were talking after the Great Hall scene. The Great Hall sequence as a whole was actually kind of a nice change-ish. It felt more serious, which I think it needed given the context. They sort of half-committed to Stoic being more of an inspiring figure. Like, I do think we needed a little more of inspirational Stoic to earn the extra scene, but they scrapped the joke where everybody goes with Stoic to find the dragon nest because they all apparently hate Hiccup, save for Gobber, and they make it more about, this is our mission, look what you've accomplished, let's keep going. Time to bounce topics a bit, but the change to Hiccup sneaking out was nice. In the original, he just leaves a back door, presumably symbolic of his life path being different. Here, he sneaks out the front door after Gobber leaves, and Hiccup is too tall for his door, which is cut into a bigger door. But he doesn't open the bigger one until the end of the movie. Also, after he tames Toothless, he always picks a dragon shield for the arena, except for the final arena fight, where everything goes haywire. I appreciate the extra little symbolism details like that. Now, later that night, Hiccup and Stoic's back and forth about dragon training is kind of gold. Like, they're passing the axe back and forth as they argue yes or no, and it's such a trope, but I shamelessly enjoy it anyway. The arena scenes, especially the first one, are, I think, fine. All the side characters get a little extra screen time. It actually serves them well, especially Rough and Tough, although they suffer from a little bit of same personality syndrome. All of them are more high school or college types, but at least they don't lose their original chemistry. I think Astrid maintains the most separation from the college energy, and she reads like she enjoys dragon training to an extent because their first scene in the arena, she sounds happy sarcastic, and she seems to be friends with Rough and Tough already. That was sweet. If anything, the extra bit of banter and the mild nonsense from Snotlout, Fishlegs, and the twins is more fun. They also gave Snotlout a good expansion, where we see his relationship with his dad, and I appreciate it. It makes his, macho act a little more sympathetic, even though they're still playing it for comedy the entire time. And I do have one critique here. They probably should have cut all the top dragon trainer dialogue because it just sounds too modern or college-y with how they framed it. The original was fine. Do the best in dragon training, you get to fight the strongest dragon. Why add a title to it? I have mixed feelings about the arena's redesign too, but I'll give them a quick bit of praise and I'll chew on them for the negatives later when they're more relevant. I like that the interior of the dragon cages was changed to look like dens. It gives a few of the dragons a cooler making an entrance type of moment. And now we get to the early Toothless scenes. And here's where you feel the pains of every modern movie. Being preachy. So after Toothless spares Hiccup, Hiccup immediately tries to preach to Astrid about how the dragons aren't so bad. Although, credit where it's due, they were using the scene as a setup for Astrid to say she's jealous of Hiccup, and for Hiccup to maybe imply he's a little jealous of her, because he says she would be a better heir to Stoic or chief or something. So, that's a situation where adding detail is nice. It's not needed, but it doesn't take anything away. Quick nitpick, though. I do think this scene and the what are you going to do now scenes were held back a bit. Because Hiccup and Astrid aren't very expressive in these two, so it's really hard to tell if Astrid feels pity for Hiccup, or if she's mad that he's bugging her, or what. I guess logically the first is annoyance and the second might be pity, but that's just a couple of scenes in comparison to the rest of the movie where they were doing great, so I'm not really fussed about it. I did feel like the Book of Dragons was done a little bit dirty, though. They're presenting it like Indiana Jones is gonna try stealing it or something. Behind a locked gate until Gobber brings it out, bigger than a school desk, although I guess that's not saying much. Anyways, just a little strange to give an ordinarily unassuming object so much presentation. And speaking of strange, how about the inconsistent cove scenes with Toothless? Sometimes the cove is its usual lake and sinkhole look, and then the other half, I swear it looks like they're on a beach. I can't show it because I believe in theater etiquette, but we get a top-down view of the cove early on, and then in some scenes, there are rock spires that shouldn't be there, and the walls don't feel as tall. Maybe this is the Mandela effect, though. Anyway, speaking of the cove walls, I like that they're taller than the animated version. It just feels claustrophobic in a good way. But, that inconsistency I mentioned was a little weird. Kind of like how they changed the accidental flight clip. Their flight was lower stakes than an introductory hang gliding lesson. And then Toothless just shakes Hiccup off. What happened? It feels so much mellower. In the original, they nearly crash into a cliff, ascend like 100 feet, and then Toothless throws Hiccup off after a dive. It's still one of my favorite scenes from the first movie. But I guess all that time they saved from cutting that scene to less than a minute could be redirected to some flying slapstick. Which, for the record, I kind of liked. You feel their inexperience, but they still dragged it out a little too long. Anyway, I'll chill. That was a lot of negatives in a row. I'm trying to be fair, not angry. So, I think next we got the Toothless and the Dragon Arena montage, right? I will say, they made a change that I can understand, but still disagree with. You might remember the iconic "dragons aren't fireproof on the inside" scene with the terrible terror in the animated version. They removed it, and I get it. You can't exactly turn one of those little dudes into a helium balloon in live action. It'd look weird. But it does make the final battle later feel a little bit like a lucky guess moment. Anyway, I appreciate that they replaced the dragon nib with dandelions, just because it felt like unnecessary, but like they're still trying, and they're still trying to give this movie something unique to its name. Like, even if the remake is forced to follow the path of the original to a T, plus some, for better or worse, modern conventions, they at least wanted to do something different. I will bring up one thing that's a little confusing. Toothless has almost no fire animations. Like, when he sneezes, he doesn't breathe fire, which deviates from the original series, but also from the live-action movie itself. Because, like, 5 minutes later, we see a Gronkle sneezing, and it breathes fire when it sneezes. Toothless also doesn't breathe fire to celebrate surviving his and Hiccup's first big flight, either. It's a personal preference, but I miss it. I'm sure it was time and budget somehow, though. I will say, the arena and its associated stunts and acting for this were great. But things are blurring a little bit, so I want to praise the extended battle sequence we got around this time. They expanded the boats getting attacked at Helheim's Gate. In the original, we just get a monstrous nightmare lighting up some of the fog. Here, it's a bit more like a horror movie. Thunderdrime spines poke out of the water and it attacks the boat, but we never see more than its dorsal spines. A trio of adders flies past, breathes fire, and then the monstrous nightmare appears. So cool. I will say, I'm undecided on Helheim's new design, though. On the one hand, I like that the dragons have a larger range of nests than the volcano. It makes the flock feel bigger and more numerous. On the other, there's these giant skrill-looking dragons on some sea stacks who blend in with them and are stationary the entire scene. They kind of stole the spotlight for the Helheim's Gate moment because I couldn't figure them out. I don't know if they're statues, real dragons, some kind of mirage, or just a nod to the Sentinels from Race to the Edge. Anyway, great fight sequence, and the ships come back, and we get some great moments after that too. Like, when everyone accidentally implies Hiccup didn't survive, you see it hit Stoic hard. Like, when Gobber clarifies that Hiccup just likes avoiding people, the heaviness stays on Stoic's face. Kind of a jerk move by Gobber and his buddies to say it like that, although I guess it's in character from the guy who interrupted a duet in How to Train Your Dragon 2 to sing himself. Snoutland and his dad get a moment here, which is appreciated. Like I said, it makes him more sympathetic while still being funny. And then after we get this, we get the easily the funniest and most unfairly relatable joke in the movie. Hiccup and his dad are talking the night he gets back, and Stoic is like, "We finally have something to talk about." Only for the pair to sit in visibly uncomfortable silence until Hiccup can think of an excuse to leave. But aside from the goofiness, my gosh, Stoic has a presence in this scene. This is one moment where you can see live action sometimes serving a story a little bit better. Like, the animated version was fantastic too. It also made Stoic feel like he's in the room, looking down on you, but I think the confines of live action help a lot here. For one thing, the room is more cluttered, so it feels smaller, or like he's not fitting super well. There's some cold lighting alongside the lamplight where the original was fully warm. There's also nothing exaggerated or slapsticky about Stoic accidentally shoving Hiccup into a pile of barrels in a corner when he congratulates him, and it takes Hiccup longer to get up. It's just awkward. The whole scene is awkward, and it's fantastic. I actually still really liked the live action's Let Me Show You scene as well, which is one I was worried about before the movie. Astrid and Hiccup are a little more sarcastic than their original counterparts, which is one of the things I referenced earlier about faithful but unique. And you know how in the original movie, Astrid's "you were right" moment was sweet? I think it's the calmest we've ever seen here. Here, I think I might actually prefer how they handled that. Astrid is more reluctantly odd than won over. I think you could argue either way for which is better, which I like. It's not a necessary change, but it's not a bad one either. And I want to appreciate the effort to deepen the debate about the dragon situation too, although I think they went about it wrong. We have preachy moment 2, which is a bummer. So, Astrid is hesitant about Hiccup's spread the message of dragon friendship plan, which is fair. And she has good points. But we get a virtue signaling Valka line instead of a really good counterargument from Hiccup. He's just like, dragons ate my mom and I still want to be their friend. And that's the extent of the debate. I don't know, I think you could have cut this and it wouldn't have changed anything. Anyway, Hiccup and Astrid form a truce. The dialogue's a lot of fun there. And Toothless flies them to Dragon Island. And you know what? This was better in live action. The volcano looks so good. You have red and gray swirling fog, the red death disguised as a rock, and then sort of spilling or popping out of the fog to eat a Gronkle. And this is one dragon who's served by the Aragon weight that a lot of the dragons get, where they're almost clumsier or heavier, since in animation, speed and weight correlate. It's more, I guess I would say, imposing. Anyway, I liked the updated final arena scene too. Stoic is giving his pre-battle speech, and Hiccup does a great job selling the emotion. Like, he looks genuinely sad as Stoic is praising him, and Hiccup knows he's basing it on something false, and he's about to find out that it's false. This is where I need to call out a logistical issue, though. A lot of the arena is made out of wood, and some flimsy-looking chains. And none of the Vikings foresaw where this might go wrong. Also, this nightmare is on fire and doing practically no damage to the arena's structural integrity. Like, he burns the support beams, but somehow not the metal he's throwing his full weight against. I know the original had invincible metal too, when the nightmare was climbing on it, but I don't think the dragon was on fire for that. Anyways, nothing else of note comes to mind until the readying for war scene. They actually made a really cool choice here, where Hiccup is watching them, but then turns his back and leaves when Stoic looks back. I appreciated that. It fits his reinterpreted character, and it feels a bit more like I believe in my choice than the original, where Hiccup read as more somber and defeated during the scene. So, one last Berk scene we should cover before we talk about the Red Death battle. The lighting just randomly faceplants for the scene where Hiccup is teaching the others to tame dragons. And I know it's deliberate. They were trying to be moody, dramatic, edgy, whatever you want to call it. The goal was to outshine the original. And instead, it's so dark I can't see like half the group's faces. Yeah, could have made a better call there. Even the sunset light scenes looked better, and Hollywood forgot how lights work there. As it gets darker, smaller details are supposed to disappear. But my bad for getting off track. Moving on. The final battle is simultaneously great and disappointing at the same time. Like, Astrid jumping into the Red Death's mouth to fight it was awesome, and the Red Death needing a massive running start to fly but still keeping up with Toothless was cool. But Toothless also spends the entire fight in God mode. We have them metagaming the not internally fireproof rule. Toothless being fireproof, but the volcanic dwelling Lava Dragon can have holes burned right through its wing. And if they were going to extend battles, why is this one kind of neglected? I think it's roughly the same amount of time as the original, or at least they have the same number of plot beats. It's a bummer, I had high hopes for it, but credit where it's due, the scene after the fight was great. Some really nice changes, like Stoic paralleling Hiccup a little, touching Toothless's nose instead of the side of his head. Also, Astrid joining Stoic to put a hand on his shoulder when they're mourning Hiccup was sweet. Now, the CGI has a slight weakness at the end after he wakes up. You can tell they green screened Hiccup's leg. I only point this out because the CGI for Gobber's prosthetic limbs was smooth the entire movie, but they also didn't appear in close-ups, so that's probably what went wrong here. Obviously, this is where Hiccup uses the bigger door to leave. I did appreciate the fact that you can see the Vikings putting metal roofs on the houses in the background. We get a line of dialogue about how everyone rode dragons on the way back, so I guess Stoic's Rumblehorn confirmed? That was why they were in the trailers? I don't really feel positive or negative about this line, I just figured I should bring it up. I do like the credit sequence. It's gorgeous, but it's a little hilarious that some of it is looking like drone footage of Iceland with a dragon layered on top. But those are my observations of the movies, so let's skip to the next topic. What should the future of live-action remakes? It may be an unpopular opinion, but why aren't all these movies given some amount of extended edition treatment? Maybe it's nostalgia, but as a kid, I loved director's cuts. I picked them up even if the normal edition was readily available. I'm not saying to have this be the end goal, because I don't think it's really enough to sell the pitch of a live-action remake, but it's a way for Hollywood to find its footing in the meantime if they're willing to take it. Next off, live action should be a love letter to their medium. What can live action do that animation can't? Practical effects. Plus, sometimes the realism. Like that moment between Hiccup and his dad that I pointed out. And why not try to make these a bit more like plays? I've seen the How to Train Your Dragon Live Spectacular and the How to Train Your Dragon Live Action. But the Live Spectacular had me in awe of what the visual medium world could do. And as I've learned more, I think I understand where a play's longevity comes from. The entire purpose is art, not realism. The dragon's movements in Live Spectacular were more limited, yes. They couldn't completely breathe fire, yes. But you can just misdirect the audience and then have some pyrotechnics on stage. Or just temporarily blind everyone with a camera flash lightning bolt, if you're desperate. The point being, let's see some live actions with a smaller set and some clever cinematography. And I've seen plays that have a screen behind them displaying an ambient environment, and the area still feels huge. Let's see some live-action creatures that look like an art project. Lion King has a fantastic, famous cheetah puppet. All of Life of Pi's puppets are driftwood. And the animatronics in the original live-action have a gorgeous artificiality to them. I will maintain that these decades-old pieces look, I don't know, more real, more tangible than anything we've seen from recent live-action remakes. And I'm not saying make animatronics for these movies, that's how you skyrocket the budget. But it couldn't hurt to try making and testing a 3D model of one of them. Guess I'll have to do that now to prove my point. Hooray! Anyway, these limitations are the entire point. All of them are used in service of wonder and in service of suspension of disbelief. Some fog, some blue lighting, and some modeled boats. It rivals hyperrealism any day of the week. But yeah, in summary, the How to Train Your Dragon live action made some good choices, some bad ones, and some neutral ones. And if the genre of live action remakes wants to survive and maybe even thrive, they should start playing to their strengths. But that's all I have to say. Thank you, and have a good day.